What's happening, friends? Welcome to another episode of Syracuse Sports, Syracuse basketball postgame presented by Krause Health, the exclusive healthcare partner for Syracuse Athletics. My name is Brent Axe. Great to have you here, though not so great in terms of the game we saw at the JMA Wireless Dome tonight. Syracuse falls to Duke 83-54, the final score. Yes, Duke does cover, depending on how you got it, 17.5, 18 on one of the biggest point spreads that Syracuse basketball has ever played under at home. Certainly in the 4-year stretch now, considering they're probably not going to make the tournament this year, that they have not made the NCAA tournament, that 4-year drought, if you will. Yeah, Duke covered and covered easily. So if you had Duke minus 18, you were feeling good about this one. If you're a Duke fan, you're feeling good about this one. The crowd at the Dome was feeling good about this one at first. A lot of energy in the building. To start, the students showed up in force in this one, but by the end, a lot of people streaming out early and adjusting their coats to walk into the bitter cold of the evening in Syracuse, New York. That's the 10th straight loss Syracuse has had to Duke, and this one of the wider margins of victory for Duke over Syracuse in this series since they started playing regularly in ACC play just about a decade ago. There's some things we'll go over game-wise. It was interesting to see the number one pick in the NBA draft. We all think certainly going to be one or two in the upcoming 2025 NBA draft. Cooper Flagg from Duke had a pretty pedestrian game by his standards, but lots of fans there to see Cooper Flagg wearing the Cooper Flagg jerseys. A great story at the Dome tonight. My colleague Chris Carlson is going to be writing about that a little bit more and kind of covering that angle of things. Of course, Malik Brown returned, certainly made his presence felt for Duke as their leading rebounder. And there's some X's and O's and there's some basketball to get into here. But what do you need to know? Okay, try not to fall over and hit your head from fainting from the shocking news that Syracuse got their doors blown off by Duke, that Syracuse is in no way, shape, or form in the same stratosphere as Duke right now. One of our Syracuse Sports Insiders, I think, said it best here. Richard B. Unfortunately, though Duke and Syracuse are in the same conference, they are in different leagues. Losing Malik to Duke is just too much salt on the wound for the Salt City faithful. And the state of college basketball was ever present in the JMA Wireless Dome tonight. A lot of things we do know, but certainly rubbing some salt in the wound, if you will, on the realities that Syracuse basketball is facing and how the gap between Syracuse and Duke, the team that's at the top of this league, the team that Syracuse is chasing, has been competitive with in the past and supposedly has not as strong of a brand as Duke, because, I mean, Duke is high level, one of the elite programs in the history of college basketball, but supposedly so is Syracuse, right? Top 10 in wins and all these things you want to throw at me, Final Fours and national championship in 03 and that history, which is ever present and it is there. And the players that they have sent to the NBA, everything about Syracuse basketball and its history, nobody's denying that. But in the here and now, the gap between Duke itself, the elite of college basketball, the level and the brand that Syracuse supposedly is trying to play to, has never been wider. And certainly some big picture things came up in Adrian Autry's press conference tonight. And that's where I want to start tonight. Okay. I want to play you a few sound bites here from Autry. This is what I wanted to ask about. Some good questions asked by my colleagues in the press conference tonight. Because when you play a team like Duke, it's the old Caddyshack line, Judge Schmales, when he says to Ty Webb, how do you measure yourself against other golfers? Ty Webb says by height, which in basketball, you do. Syracuse clearly not as long, not as physical, not as athletic, nowhere near as close to the blue chip programs, blue chip players in that program that Duke has, right? We knew that coming in. Cooper Flagg, just one example of that, but you did have one of those players on your roster last year. His name's Malik Brown, and he came in and had 6 points, 8 rebounds, 3 steals, a few other deflections, and made a huge difference in this game. But I want to focus on a few things that Adrian Autry said after this game, okay? Let me play a couple of these sound bites.
We got to keep building this thing, and obviously when you talk about when we got into this league, college was different. Everybody needs to understand that. College is different. All right? College is different. It's not what it used to be. All right? So That's the reality, and everyone, for us, we're not doing any different. Everybody's going through it, not everybody, but most, you got to kind of reshape this and get this thing going, and we will.
Okay, two things there. One, we got the memo, Coach. College is different. Players get paid now. There is a transfer portal. We are in a different era. It's only going to continue to get different, by the way, with the House settlement coming up. It is semi-pro, somewhat professional sports. We all got that memo, and we all understand it. He was also asked, I don't have the audio from this clip, but he was asked if he feels he has everything he needs to compete in that environment, by those rules. Said it 3 times. College basketball is different, and that was compared to when Syracuse and Duke started playing in the ACC in that epic game in 2014, one of the greatest college basketball games I've ever seen. When Syracuse and Duke were in the same breath, in the same conversation, and could play an epic game like that. That was only a decade ago where that happened, right? We get it. We got the memo. College basketball is different. Okay? So that annoyed me. To continue to come back to that, we get it. Okay? The fans get it. We all understand how different the sport is. And the rapid changes it has gone under, and maybe not for the better, according to a lot of people that are losing that identity and the thing that they can really feel that college sports is. That's a different conversation for a different time. But come on, we all know that it's different. One more, all right, 2 more from Autry.
I think, I think the biggest thing is, we have to do a better job of playing longer and consistently. I think, defensively, and obviously, we haven't had a chance to play with our whole team this year. I think, we started off with a new team, and I think we started a little slower. And some of those teams, they have a little bit of continuity, and they can go into their bench and kind of keep the same level of play. I think when you talk about those teams, those top tier teams, they can play 9, 10, 11 guys, and it's not much of a drop off.
So against those top tier teams, and again, shout out to my guy Chris Smith, who is keeping track of this and keeping track of what are significant losses in the Autry era to those name band programs. Now, that question that was asked is, what can you do to bring Syracuse back up to the level of these big name programs that you are playing? Okay, just this year, you lost to Duke to Duke tonight, 83-54. You lost to Tennessee by 17. You lost to Gonzaga by this is last year. Tennessee by 17, Gonzaga by 19, Virginia 22, Duke 20 last year, UNC 36. They did beat North Carolina in the return game. Florida State 16, Wake Forest 29, Clemson 15, NC State 18. Okay, this is this year. You lost to Tennessee by 26 points, Maryland by 27, Florida State by 16, Louisville by 24, Clemson by 14. I mean, significant, embarrassing double-digit losses, many of which are on national television, which tonight was, the ESPN, ESPN2, or one of the networks, CBS, sometimes Fox. Those are the matchups, and those are the television assignments where you want to look your best. And all Syracuse does when they reach that bright spotlight is look their worst, right? So add another double-digit, embarrassing, in no way, shape, or form in the game loss. And I get how good Duke is and who they are and who they have on their roster. But again, I don't think there's any better scenario to show where you are in the college basketball landscape than to play the team. And Syracuse did play at one point, was the number 1 team in the country this year. I just mentioned how much they lost to them by. And it's yet again an example of losing to a team that's in your own league that at once upon a time you did play competitive games against. But now you just kind of come in knowing you kind of have to accept your fate and accept, that you're just going to get spanked by this team, right? So I don't know where he's coming from there. Let me play one more clip.
So, I know we're headed in the right direction, and, we'll be fine, But, I think Alex will do a great job. He's doing a great job, and we'll continue. We're building this thing, and we're building it to be strong and to get back to what we all know this thing used to be and what we want it to be. And we'll continue to make strides and do that, with me and the administration and everyone on the same page moving forward. Thank you.
And I know and understand that he kind of has to say that. You don't want a head coach in a podium in that scenario be like, I don't know, guys. We'll see. It's 50-50. Could go either way. I get that. But why should I believe you? And why should this fan base believe you that it will get better? We're doing the things they need to do. Now, Alex Klein is who he's mentioning there, who Syracuse hired as general manager, and you need a general manager in college sports today, just like you need one in professional sports, because I don't know if you guys know this, but college sports is different, as I was reminded at the press conference tonight. Alex Klein has not had a whole offseason to do what general managers do, raise money, identify talent in the portal, and all those things that have made the game different. Hubert Davis, North Carolina, this week acknowledged it himself. The game has changed. We need to hire a general manager, right? And everybody that's at that kind of power 4-5 level in college sports, they're all going to have them, certainly in this offseason, if not in the next year or two, right? So Syracuse does have one. And I think Alex Klein, for his reputation, for what I know about Alex and what he's being tasked to do, I think Syracuse did find a good one there. But there's just so much pressure being put on him to essentially put all this on next year and turn this thing around. And you have Sadiq White coming in, and you have Kiyan Anthony coming in. I think you got to put Luke Fennell and Aaron Womack in that conversation as well, who are a part of that recruiting class. Sadiq and Kiyan are certainly the 5-star, high-level, top 40 rated guys, particularly Kiyan and his family connections, of course. But you're counting on all those guys and the unnamed players you got to find out of the portal to at least be competitive with the best of the best in this league. I felt bad for the fans tonight. And let me say this, the crowd tonight was fantastic, okay? That crowd that was announced as 23,313, can I do the meme for you here? Claimed to be the largest on-campus crowd in college basketball this year, right? But no matter what the number was, and it wasn't that, it was a good crowd. There was a buzz in the building. I mentioned how good the students were. The people that came, that showed out, that wanted to see this game, this matchup, Cooper Flagg, whatever your reason for going, just being a Syracuse fan and still watching your team, even though, a lot of fans have kind of soured on what they're seeing and the fair weather fans have flown. And we know that. I mean, it's unfortunate, but there's a reason I've talked about the fair weather 10,000 for years. And that's with any fan base, by the way, right? There's just certain fans that if they're not good, if it doesn't feel like a thing to do, and Syracuse Duke was the social event in this town for a good stretch of time. So it was the largest crowd at the Dome this year. It was the best crowd in the Dome this year. It felt big. And look, the Duke element to that was there. I mentioned all the Duke fans that were in the building, but man, it felt big. And for about 28 minutes in this game, Syracuse is only down 37-23. I say only down 37-23 at halftime. But it didn't feel like Duke was dominating, right? But to get to the basketball element of this, right? Because I've been talking big picture here. Syracuse had 14 turnovers in this game. Duke had 23 points off turnovers. Meanwhile, Duke turned the ball over just 6 times, right? Syracuse turned the ball over 14. So that's been a problem for Syracuse consistently all year. It is double time when you play one of the best defensive teams in the country, and that has to be noted, right? Duke is a top 5 Ken Pom offensive and defensive efficiency team. They're one of the best defensive teams in college basketball. If they're going to win the national championship, that's going to be why. I mean, they can score in bunches, and they have one of the best players in the country and everything that Duke is. But I think that's what separates Duke from a lot of teams is just how good they are defensively. So Syracuse is going to struggle against that. But there were a lot of possessions where Syracuse was just dribble too much, right down to the shot clock, and maybe trying to work that to their advantage because the less that Cooper Flagg and Duke has the ball, the less that Proctor has the ball. I mean, 5 guys got into double figures for Duke tonight. Maybe that was part of your strategy, and I somewhat understand that, but you can't waste possessions against Duke. You can't throw up bad shots against Duke. You can't turn the ball over at that rate and let a team, and again, Duke had a lot to do with this with their defense, but 23 points off turnovers. You know one of the weirdest stats in this game? and TV Teddy was reffing, Duke got to the free throw line 19 times. Syracuse got to the free throw line 4 times. Right to the end of this game, it could have been the first time in like 25 years that Syracuse didn't make a free throw because they weren't getting to the free throw line. Not that they were trying to get into the paint early in the game. I think Jair Davis did a nice job tonight. 1 or 2 bonuses you can look at. I think Davis played the way he needs to play. Get in the paint. And you're challenging some long, physical, really good players there, and he held his own. How about Naheem McLeod? Shout out to Naheem. 10 points tonight. Played 22 minutes. Showed that he can hang. Eddie Lampkin got in a little bit of a foul trouble. He had 2 points and 7 rebounds tonight, and just certainly when you're out there and you're looking in the portal for guys and you're paying guys what they get in the portal and you're bringing in players and paying them $500,000, you got to play better against Duke. These are the teams that you bring in the high-priced talent for. 2 points, 7 rebounds, not going to cut it. Dribbling too much, just completely outmatched. And again, Duke is Duke, okay? Duke's got some great players out there, but this is why you go out there and try and find that kind of talent for these games to show that you can hang with these teams and anything but that. So shout out to Naheem McLeod, who showed that he can hang in there, that he is an option, that he can give you some quality minutes. When you got a 7'4" veteran on the roster, you want to be able to use him. Syracuse tried to go zone, didn't work. Duke hit 3 threes, bing, bang, boom, and showed that that was not going to be the defense that works against Cal, who's the 17th rated three-point shooting team in the ACC. It's not going to work against Duke because they just have better shooters and better players. And Duke was 9 of 23 from 3, Syracuse 6 of 23. But the edge, Duke went at a pace when Syracuse went zone, piled up some threes, and just put enough of a gap in there. And this is without Cooper Flagg having a Cooper Flagg game, by the way. He had 11 points and 5 rebounds. I've watched Cooper Flagg a lot this year, and every other time I've watched him, he's been a lot better than he was tonight because he had a lot of help. He didn't need to be Cooper Flagg, though we saw a couple Cooper Flagg moments. That one dunk he had where he kind of poor Naheem, who had pretty much a good game. But in this case, Cooper Flagg kind of slithers by him right up the baseline, throws down a one-handed jam where you're like, if you're looking for that moment, you're looking for that moment that validates the price of admission. Like, I hear this guy's the number 1 pick in the draft, and I want to see a moment that validates that. That was the moment. That was the Cooper Flagg moment, and not that there weren't some other good plays, and you could see the skill set, a big man that can move like that can play guard, that can shoot the 3, that can get in the paint the way that he does. He just turned 18 like a month and a half ago, still has so much time to develop, but the skill set he has now, you can see why he's the consensus number 1 pick in the draft. Like, there's no question he's going number 1. I'd be stunned if he didn't, and if he doesn't, he's going number 2, and whoever gets him at number 2 is going to have the biggest party you've ever seen, that he fell to them, pardon me, at number 2. But it wasn't a Cooper Flagg is going to be all over Sportscenter type of game, short of that one dunk that he had, right? But you got that moment, and you saw that's where Duke is. And you know what? Once upon a time, Syracuse, maybe it wasn't on their level, but they were at a level where you could hang with this team, and you could compete with this team, and you could fight with this team, and you could make it a game. Even some of the best Syracuse-Duke games were Syracuse, the John Gillen game, which also was on a Wednesday night, by the way. That team it was better than this team. It was a team that should have made the tournament. It was one of those years, ironically, where Syracuse was held out of the tournament when they should have been in it. So certainly at a higher level and in a conversation to be in the tournament, but not a great Syracuse team by any stretch. And they beat Duke in the Dome on that John Gillen buzzer beater. But here's your scores from your last 10 games. 83-54, 86-66, 77-55, 88-79. That was in the ACC tournament. 97-72, 79-59, 85-71, 97-88, 84-72, 75-65. That goes back to the 2018-19 season. The last Syracuse win over Duke was in Durham, overtime, 95-91 Tyus battle. That was the 2018-19 season, and it feels just so much more distant into the past than that. That, the last time Syracuse was ranked, by the way, in the top 25, December of 2018. So the gap's never been wider. It is humbling how much better Duke is than Syracuse. College basketball's different. I don't know if you guys know that. John Shire comes in, and I know Duke is Duke and has a certain level of advantage that Syracuse does not. But it was interesting to hear, I don't have the clip here, but John Shire, and look, he's not going to go up there and disparage Syracuse, but let me pull up the quote here. When he was asked about Syracuse, he said, quote, "I know our respect level for Syracuse is high as it's ever been, even though records may vary from year to year, just to be a part of some amazing environments and amazing games. That's the approach I'll always take with Syracuse. They have one of the best brands in college basketball. Red's a great coach. This thing is going to go in waves sometimes. It just is. For us, ton of respect for them and what they can do as we go forward." I mean, that's nice, John. But I think you're just being nice in saying that, because none of what you said has any credibility for what Syracuse is doing. Tell me why they're still one of the great brands in college basketball, because they have not validated that. They haven't been in the tournament for 4 years, and they have not been in the AP Top 25 since December of 2018. You have to renew these receipts. There's some brand equity, if you will, that comes from history, that comes from stars and Carmelo Anthony, and we can have that conversation. It's not like Syracuse basketball fell in on itself, but a lot of that has not been renewed in recent years. Duke renews it every single year. Kentucky, go through those blue blood programs, even ones that have a year or two off. Syracuse is in a sustained slump from having that title as one of the great brands. Red's a great coach. Red also loses big to the brand name teams on the program consistently. And I'd like to see more validation for why he's a great coach. Nobody can tell me why. Right? I need to see that. And I think the fans need to see that, and that needs to be validated, right? In some way. Still has a chance maybe to do it, but I have my doubts about that, right? Ton of respect for them and what they can do as we go forward. I mean, you've beaten them 10 times in a row. And, good on Shire that he doesn't go up there. He's not like pulling a Mick Cronin in that press conference like, man, we're wasting our time coming up here. We beat him 10 times in a row. He's not going to say that. But none of what he said lines up for what reality is, unfortunately. I don't get no pleasure in saying this, but it's the truth, and you know it. All right, that's enough of me. I was in a saucy mood, as you guys can tell. But, again, there is no better way to really compare yourself. If those things are going to be said about you, then to go out there against the best brand in college basketball, one of the best teams in college basketball. They've now played the number 1 and number 2 team in the country this year and lost 83-54, and that other Tennessee loss was by 26 points. I mean, that just tells you where we are and all you need to know. So I think Richard had a great comment from our Syracuse Sports Insiders to lead us off. And again, a reminder, guys, being a Syracuse Sports Insider means you can text me directly. Your thoughts, your opinions, your questions on all manner of Syracuse sports. Football. We're still talking football? Of course we are. They're in a dead period for recruiting, the transfer portal. Syracuse just picked up a player out of the portal this week, so as long as your name's in the portal, you can still kind of find some guys in there. Spring practice will be here before you know it. The football team was out there at the Dome tonight, by the way, showing off the Holiday Bowl trophy, signing autographs in the backcourt area for $25. Because you got to look under every rock for NIL cash these days. I don't think you should have been charging people $25 to sign autographs, but that's just me, right? Once in a while, you can throw people a freebie if they paid money to come to a basketball game and let them go grab an autograph for free. But I don't know. I get it. NIL money. Got to do the thing. Lacrosse up and running. And of course, as we continue to cover these basketball, look, both teams aren't good. The women's team's not doing well. The men's team's not doing well, but there's so much to cover and discuss. And that's what being a Syracuse Sports Insider means. You can ask me your questions and comments about this. I send you, if we have breaking news, you get it first, analysis, opinion every day, just all the things you need to know sent right to your phone as a Syracuse Sports Insider. We'd love for you to sign up today. It's just $3.99 a month, or try free for 2 weeks. Check it out, including Michael B. Says the end of this Syracuse basketball season can't come soon enough. I mean, yeah, people are frustrated, right? That could the Duke game give you some kind of moment? Look, nobody was expecting a win. And I hate to be this guy because, the old, you gave it the old, to use the expression, the old college fight. Oh man, they only lost to Duke by 10. Could you at least come out of this game with that kind of feeling that you punched him in the nose, held him down, gave the people that came to the game and watched on national television, which I did not see, but I heard Jay Williams was as insufferable as ever. So I hate that my friend Kevin Brown has to work with Jay Williams. I mean, maybe they get along and that's great, but anytime Jay Williams is watching a game, is commentating a game, mute, and you put on the radio broadcast, right? Anyway, Neil says, I'm ready for next season. Jim B, not that Jim B, says, as a fan, I hate to admit, I turned off the game. At this point in the season, just play the guys that may be back next year. On that note, Adrian Autry did not have an update on Donnie Freeman. They're kind of making that decision about whether Freeman's going to shut it down. I don't know if he needs surgery, but he's thinking about his future as a pro prospect, his future here. I'm not a doctor. I just play one on a podcast. I don't know if it's the type of injury that he can make worse if he plays on it and doesn't want to risk that. So he's got some decisions to make, and they're kind of at that point. Autry said earlier this week they're going to know soon what the plan's going to be because it's in Freeman's hands now. And Autry's just kind of waiting for them to make the decision. You got to confer with your camp. You've got agents now. You've got medical teams. You've got all sorts of business decisions, frankly, that you have to make. So we didn't get an update on that tonight, but it feels like we're going to know it's maybe by the end of the week what that plan's going to be. And given that Donnie Freeman just missed his 9th straight game, he's still in a boot. He's not practicing. I don't think we're going to see him again this year. I'd love to be wrong about that. I hope he's healthy enough to get out there and play and continue to. This is a team that, to be fair, and Autry brought this up at the press conference afterwards, they haven't had their whole team this year. JJ's out 7 games. Freeman was out of the lineup pretty much when JJ came back. I'd like to see JJ and Freeman in the same lineup for more than just the few games that we got to see that, but that's college basketball. College basketball is different now. Duke can go down the lineup, and they were missing a player tonight. Mason was out tonight, right? It's going to happen. You need depth. You need somebody. I mean, Freeman is, highest rated recruit since Carmelo Anthony, a guy that you can't afford to miss at this point of the season for this long. And he's not replaceable. And that, I think Jair Davis can get in there, and tonight he got in the paint a little bit better and has a certain skill set, and they can kind of, to steal a line from Moneyball, they can kind of replace Freeman in the aggregate, but I think you miss a talent like that. And to miss 9 games, I think the development of Freeman, the kind of player he would be at this point, certainly had to work on his defense, but you needed that kind of scoring out there tonight. You need a guy that could shoot, that could get in the paint, that could draw some defense out. A very good defensive team, mind you, but that's a fair point to make, but that's also college basketball today, right? You got to have some depth when players like that go down. Syracuse just didn't have the depth to replace either of them, frankly. When JJ was out, it was a completely different team. Freeman, I don't know, man. I just don't see how he comes back at this point, but I'd love to be pleasantly surprised and to be wrong about that. Lacey jumps in. I don't know if Brian's asleep on the couch by now, but Lacey says, I didn't expect any high level of success from this game. I'm over moaning and groaning about the downfalls. I will say the first half was semi-pleasing, but looks like they've been working on defense. However, the offense still stagnant, and Eddie just isn't quick enough to be effective against Duke. That offensive thing, again, Duke's a really good defensive team, and I want to be fair about that, but there were just too many possessions, Eddie in particular, where it's just dribble, dribble, dribble. It's iso ball. Guys, come on. you got to keep the ball moving. If you're playing a good defense like that, you at least have to pretend to challenge it and not make it easy on a good defensive team to keep you out of the paint, to challenge you, to when you're just ISO, you're making it too easy on a good defensive team. Make them chase you. Move the ball around, right? Is there anything in your bag of tricks you haven't used yet that you put out there tonight? I mean, Duke's just that much more talented than Syracuse. That talent disparity was on full display. So she just, I'm saying it's like that old Saturday Night Live bit, do something, right? Well, you can't do anything about it if you don't have the talent to match up there. But I think they did make it a little too easy on that team. But that's been a problem for Syracuse all year, right? From my man Paul. Just want to jump in and hold on. Give me a sec. Okay, here it is. From Paul. It says 2 areas of silver lining for the Orange. Naheem McLeod's play, yes, agree. And SU played hard until the bitter end. The talent disparity was just too great. I agree with 2 out of those 3 things, Paul. McLeod's play was great. The talent disparity was too great. Did they play hard to the bitter end? No. The last 5-6 minutes of that game, Duke had way too many breakaways. It became just play. And these are their backups, by the way. Syracuse struggled against Duke's backups, but Duke's backups are, as good as a lot of mid-level teams in the ACC. Duke's backups could probably finish in the middle of the ACC on their own. The last 5-6 minutes of this thing, when it became a laugher, I don't think I'd be patting people on the back with this. They played hard to the bitter end. Duke was getting a lot of breakaways late in the game that Syracuse wasn't exactly chasing down with full vigor. So for 33 minutes, you're right. I'll grant you that. But the last 6-7 minutes of the game, I don't know if I'd say that. Now we're getting a little too complimentary of things, right? And by the way, look, playing hard, that's like baked in the cake. Like you're supposed to do that, right? I don't know why we compliment a team at this level for going out there and playing hard, which that you're supposed to do that, especially against Duke. I hope you're playing hard for 40 minutes against Duke, but they didn't. Matt P says, this team is so forgettable. I won't miss a single player, won't remember a single moment, no fight, no cohesion, no nothing. Sadly, I just can't wait for this season to be over. I mean, they're 10-13 now. They're 4-8. They are well on track of if they make the ACC tournament, which right now they would. Right now, the women's team would not, by the way. They're in bottom 3 of the ACC. So remember, this year, only 15 of 18 teams go to the ACC tournament. 3 get left out. Bottom 3 teams in each, both men and women, get left out of the ACC tournament. Syracuse is on track at least to get there and try and salvage something, but given Syracuse's poor history in the ACC tournament, you can't count on that, right? It's becoming, the lost season would be strong, but think about this. Syracuse could have played in the NIT last year and chose not to. They're probably not even going to qualify for it this year. It's just kind of where things are heading. Gabe wants to put a positive spin on things and say they do have 2 winnable games coming up. Boston College on Saturday, then at Miami next week, and they could get back to 12-13, knocking back on the door of 500. Ryan F. says, I thought when this NIL game started that Syracuse would have a leg up and we'd be dominating. I guess it's been proven that they got off to a rocky start and are now doing horribly with it. And again, that puts so much pressure, and there's a lot of pressure anyway, but it puts so much pressure to fix this thing in one offseason, to strike in the portal, to add, you're going to need a center again. You're going to need a point guard. You've got that recruiting class coming in that we mentioned. Luke Fennell's a great shooter. Aaron Womack, I saw the other day, dropped 50 in a game. Mind you, it's high school basketball, but you can score 50 points. You're pretty good. And I think we know the scouting reports with Sadiq White and Kyan Anthony at this point. But see, that's the thing with Donnie Freeman and whether or not he'll be back on this team next year or not. They're completely different players, right? I don't think they can coexist on the same roster given that they play the same position, but they're completely different players. Donnie's more of an offensive-minded player. Sadiq's actually this will be a breath of fresh air. Loves to play defense and is good at defense and leans into his defense, but not so much of a shooter. He is an offensive threat around the basket. He's one of the best dunkers you'll ever see, but not a guy that can stray too far from the hoop right now. Kyan Anthony is an offensive weapon, can shoot the three, can shoot in the paint, and is just developing as a prospect. You kind of wonder how much his evaluation gets distorted being Carmelo Anthony's kid, but he's a solid player, right? We don't know as much about Fennell and Womack, and we'll get to know those guys certainly more by the time next season comes, but that's a lot to put on 4 freshmen to turn around your fortunes. So seeing who comes back from this current team, does an Elijah Moore come back, or does he go in the portal? We've talked about Donnie Freeman. You got to get a couple guys out of the portal like everybody does, but Syracuse certainly has some glaring positional needs that they have to address. I get that's where we're at in college sports today. According to Autry, as asked in this press conference, they have what they need to compete. Okay. I'll believe it when I see it, because this team is proving that maybe they didn't. Couple more from our Syracuse Sports Insiders. Antonio F. says, I guess if you don't know where you're going, any direction is the right direction. Look, people are feeling snarky here. I don't just pick out the comments that reinforce my point, right? This is, if anything, you guys influence what I say on this show based on what the text line is saying and what the feeling is, right? I try to balance it out, positive, negative, everything in between, but people are just, they've kind of had it at this point. And not that anybody was surprised that they went out there and Duke won 83-54. Certainly nobody's surprised to see Duke win by 29 points, right? It's just that deflating feeling that you're just nowhere near. The great comment we let off with, you may be in the same conference, but you are nowhere near in the same league as this program. And once upon a time, at least you were in the running for that. You could feel like you could go into this game and compete. 10 straight games now, that has not been the case. From James W. says, I truly feel for Autry. I'm rooting for him to turn it around, but I think he's got one more year to do it just based on butts in seats. Frank H., after watching, listening, or attending for over 50 years while being less than a handful, tonight is the first time I turned off a Syracuse game before the final buzzer. From Jack H. says the entire night should be the nail in the coffin of the Autry era. The university is practically giving tickets away to a game against a top 10 team. We lose at home by 30-plus points. This is the third time that Syracuse hasn't only not been able to compete against superior talent, but have been embarrassed on a national stage. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Autry does not elevate, and got cut off there at the end, but does not elevate this program. All the blowout losses that I brought up earlier, I mean, there it is right there. We know that college basketball is different. Why should we believe you when you say we're going to fix this thing, right? I mean, we see what's coming over the horizon, the beacon over the hill, as I've said many times, but they are just putting so many eggs in that basket, and eggs are expensive these days, right? As are college basketball players, as is the NIL game. Is it just that simple? Because sometimes just because you pay the most for a guy doesn't mean you're buying the best players. There have been some misfires there. Just because somebody is demanding a certain level of cash doesn't mean they're going to come in and be the best guy. For the most part, you want to hope you're getting the case. St. John's paid a pretty penny for Kadari Richmond, and he's out there having a great game for St. John's the other night. What do you have, 11, 18, and like 6 assists, something like that? That was worth it for St. John's to do that. Syracuse spent the most that they had in the portal on Eddie Lampkin. These are the games you need your high-priced talent to really shine. Didn't happen, right? Not that Eddie hasn't shined at times this year before and what he's fought through, and I like the way he plays, and I think that you filled a need there. Naheem's come around lately, but this team needed Eddie Lampkin to even be where they are. So that's not knocking Lampkin, but these are the games you pay high-priced talent for. And he had 2 points, 7 rebounds, and just overwhelmed in the paint, which a lot of people would be by Duke, don't get me wrong, but When you're out there paying money for these guys and they're now semi-professional athletes, these are the games you're paying for, right? So it's just that simple, right? You just need more NIL money. You just got to buy your players. There's just so much more to it than that. I totally understand that's part of it, but there's just so much more to it than that, right? And I think we saw that tonight with Duke. Well-coached team, deep team. Duke's Duke. They're going to get who they get year in and year out. Just 5-star players, highest level caliber guys just strolling on in. I'm not trying to say Syracuse should be on their level year in and year out, but what we saw tonight was just how big of a gap there is between the standard bearer in the league and one of the standard bearers in college basketball and Syracuse, which once upon a time was what John Shire described it as, but in the here and now is trying to figure out what it is in this era. And you can say get back to, but getting back to what? You're getting back to a reputation, but in a different time in college sports, much like the football team did, right? I didn't think that was the right way to describe the football team, that they're back. No, the football team found success in the new era in college sports. While nodding to history and recognizing what came before this, you have to make inroads in the new era, which Syracuse basketball just has not done. And tonight was about as big of an example of that as you could get. So they lose to Duke 83-54. Your comments were awesome as always, Syracuse Sports Insiders. Appreciate that. A couple of programming reminders for you. Thursdays, we're doing live pods here. So if you're watching on the Syracuse basketball Facebook page, if you're watching on YouTube, if you are listening on Spotify, YouTube, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts, we're doing live pods Thursday afternoon. Tomorrow we're going to do one about probably about 4 o'clock tomorrow, but I'll send a text to our Syracuse Sports Insiders and let you guys know exactly what time it's going to be. But we're hopping on live on Thursday, just kind of talking about the big topics in Syracuse sports. Chris Carlson and I are going to debate a few things tomorrow. Certainly we'll talk more about this matchup, but throw in a few other topics as well. So come hang live with us on these same channels that you watch the postgame shows. But if you can't check it out live, it'll be on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, all the places you get your podcasts, right? So get in that habit. Thursday afternoons, we'll be hanging out live, talking Syracuse sports. We got our next postgame show coming Saturday. Syracuse plays Boston College. It's a 3:15 tip time. So Saturday evening, we'll be back for another Syracuse basketball postgame show. That also at home. See if Syracuse can rebound and take down BC after this loss tonight. But in the meantime, Syracuse falls to 10-13, 4-8 in ACC play. Duke takes this one 83-54. Thanks for hanging with us here on Syracuse Basketball Postgame, presented by Krause Health, the exclusive healthcare partner for Syracuse Athletics. My name is Brent Axe. We will catch you next time, friends.